What's up, y'all? Welcome to At the End of the Day podcast. I'm your host, Cherie, and I hope you're having an amazing day so far. Now, before we get started, you already know, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you can be notified of all the new episodes as they drop. And as I always say, please leave a comment because I love to hear from y'all. I love to hear your feedback. Now, for weekly encouragement, make sure you go and follow my Facebook page and follow me on Instagram and TikTok under the name ATEOTD Podcast. If you need someone to talk to or just have a topic that you would like to hear me talk about, make sure you send me an email to ATEOTDpodcast8@gmail.com. And as I always say, make sure you share this episode with someone because you just never know what they're going through and it may encourage them more than you think. So normally when I go ahead and start these episodes, I share a sermon that encouraged the topic for the episode. This time, there's not a specific sermon that encouraged this episode, but it's a series of sermons that encouraged this episode. In each of those series, they spoke about the fruit of the Spirit, and there were a lot of instances where they spoke about one of the fruits of the Spirit being goodness. In those series, they had moments where they spoke about the power in the word good. So the series I'm referring to are three. The first one would be Pastor Mike Todd's series of Fresh Fruit. The second series would be Pastor Mike Todd's series Receipts. The proof is in the fruit. And then the third series is from Pastor John Hanna, and the name of that series was Strange Fruits. Now, as I'm recording this episode, both of the last two series I mentioned, the one from Pastor Mike Todd about receipts, and then the second one from Pastor John Hanna about strange fruits, both of them are actively happening as I'm recording this episode. But the last few sermons they have done have truly challenged my view of the word good, and it challenged me to view good as enough. So in today's episode, I will discuss how being good is enough. So let's intentionally grow our garden. So it seems like everyone is aiming to be great, right? To the point where great is the standard. Great is the expectation. To the point that you have arguments about who is the GOAT. GOAT meaning greatest of all time, right? But the question becomes, who made great the standard? And I don't think any of us really know who made great the standard. I don't think it's one specific person that did that. So I think one important part of this episode is us defining the difference between great and the word good. So we're going to start with the definition of great. Great as an adjective by Oxford Languages Dictionary is defined as of an extent, amount, or intensity considerably above the normal or average. So in other words, being great means that you are more than average. I think we can all agree with that definition. Good as an adjective by Oxford Languages Dictionary is defined as to be desired or approved of, having the qualities required for a particular role. So I have a few questions that I want you to think about. It's only about two, right? So I ain't going to have you thinking too hard. All right. It's the end of the day. So the first question I have is, if everybody is aiming to be great, right? And that is the goal. That is the expectation. That is the standard. What if God said that good is enough? And the follow-up question is, isn't his acceptance the only one that matters? So I personally feel like society has set that standard of greatness. Meanwhile, God has set a standard of good. And I feel like when we go ahead and we try to please society, we're constantly aiming towards greatness. And then the problem with that is that we're aiming for greatness so much that we totally ignore the parts that are good. The parts that are good of us, the parts that are good around us, everything that is associated with good, we don't see it because we're only focused on great. And while we're focused on great, this creates a lot of pressure, unnecessary pressure. Because if God did not require us to be great, why are we aiming for greatness? And we're aiming for greatness only because society has deemed that as the ultimate goal. If you're not being great, then they deem you as not worthy. And that is a problem. At that point, you're trying to get approval from society instead of getting approval from God. Now, even though society is putting the pressure on us to reach a standard of greatness, God doesn't put this pressure on us at all. He does expect us to be the best version of ourselves, but he doesn't go ahead and say, you better be great. Greatness is all you'll ever achieve. If you're not great, I'm not going to love you. He doesn't do that to us. And how do I know that? Genesis chapter 1. There was a sermon that I was listening to one day, and they read Genesis chapter 1, and they spoke about how many times in Genesis chapter 1, which we all know is the very beginning, the word good is used multiple times. Not great, good. So it really impacted my life. So I'm going to read Genesis chapter 1, and I'm reading from the New King James Version. And as I'm reading it, I want you to pay attention to how many times I use the word good and what I'm using the word good towards. Okay? So Genesis chapter 1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw that the light was good and separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. So I'm going to skip down to verse 9. Okay? So when we start back up there, it says, and God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to his kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. I love that chapter because it literally explains to us that God went ahead, created the heavens and the earth. He created stars. Gave the earth light. Then went ahead and deemed darkness as nighttime, and also created all the living creatures and looked at all of that and deemed it good. Now, it didn't say that he kept working and making changes to all those things until he deemed them great. No. Because if that was the case, that's what it would have said. But it didn't. It said that he went ahead, created them, deemed them good, and moved on to the next thing. Now, my favorite part of the chapter is where God goes ahead and creates all these things, right? I'm talking about land and sea, earth as a whole. He creates stars. He creates day and night. He's creating vegetables and fruits and trees. He's creating living creatures. He goes ahead and creates all of that and deems them good. That's cool. But then he goes ahead and creates mankind. That's you and I. And looks at it and deems them as very good. And again, he could have said great, but he didn't. He said good. And not just good, but very good. And let's not forget the definition of the word good. It means to be desired or approved of, having the qualities required for a particular role. So that means that God looked at us and gave us his approval. And that's the only approval that matters. That means that God looked at us and considered us as having all the qualities necessary to be considered his child. We have to start embracing what God calls us. And what did he call us after he created us? Very good. So today I want to share 3 ways that you can embrace good being enough. The first way is to stop aiming for greatness. Now, when I say stop aiming for greatness, I'm not asking you to stop working towards being the best version of yourself. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have a habit of associating greatness with perfection. And we know that there's only one person that's considered perfect, and his name is Jesus Christ. He was perfect in every aspect of the work. Okay? So we can't keep deeming greatness as perfection. We have to learn to embrace and be proud of the parts of us that are good. Because there's nothing wrong with being a good mother, a good father, a good wife, a good husband, a good friend, a good sibling, a good uncle, a good entrepreneur, a good hairstylist, a good athlete, a good writer, a good doctor, a good nurse. There's nothing wrong with being good. And you shouldn't wait until you get to greatness to go ahead and be proud of yourself. Be proud of yourself for being good in those areas. When we focus on greatness being the ultimate goal, we miss out on loving the parts of ourselves that is simply good. Our need to achieve greatness starts to overshadow the parts of us that are good. Now, by doing this, we have deemed the parts of us that are good as not worthy enough to love. But who said the parts of you that are good are not worth loving? I'll tell you who told you that. Society told you that. And to be honest, the devil went ahead and sprinkled his little 2 cents in there too. But that's not true. Because who said that the parts of you that are good are enough to love? That would be God. And one thing we know about God to be true is that he is not a liar. Okay? So if he said that the parts of you that are good are worth loving, you should love those parts of yourself as well. So I want you to make a list of all the things about you that are good. And then I want you to embrace that list. Because when God created you, he looked at you and deemed you as very good. Don't allow your desire and need to achieve greatness to overshadow that list. A second way you can embrace good being enough is to give yourself grace. Now, unfortunately, we have a habit of being too hard on ourselves, right? We go ahead and we got a list of things that we want to achieve. Then we turn around and got a list of things we need to do daily. And then we have the nerve to have a list of things we need to do for other people. It becomes a lot. Now, I feel like being hard on ourselves stems from us feeling the need to be in a different place emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, or spiritually. And let's be honest, we tend to set the bar for ourselves, and that bar always seems to be extremely high. Okay? Nobody else set it that high majority of the time. Most times it's us who went ahead and set that bar. Now, the problem with setting a bar that high is that when we go ahead and we don't reach that bar, we start to feel like a failure. And that alone is a lot of pressure. But the truth is that even when you don't reach that bar, it's okay. You not reaching the bar that you set for yourself does not make you a failure. Now, I understand that it's frustrating that you are not where you want to be. But where you are right now is still worth embracing. For example, say you are somebody that went from never working out ever to setting a goal of, I'm going to work out 5 days a week. First 3 weeks, you're killing it, right? You are going to the gym 5 days a week like clockwork. But then life happens the 4th week, and now you only went 2 days that week. Now, you normally want to be hard on yourself. You're like, oh, look at you. You can't be consistent. And again, you know the devil love when you talk like that, right? So he's like, yeah, look at you. You're not good enough. And you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm not good enough. Look at me thinking that I could go ahead and do 5 days a week all the time. And I just went ahead and didn't do 2. And it just makes me upset that I did that. Why are you being hard on yourself? You went from doing nothing to at least doing 2 days that week. That is something to be proud of. You could have gone ahead and went back to doing nothing that week, but you didn't. You at least did 2 days. You didn't give up. You kept going. And that's a good trait to have. Now, another area that we tend to be hard on ourselves is when it comes to being there for those we love and care about. I need you to understand that you are only one person. You can't be everything to everybody. You are no help to anyone if you are pouring from an empty cup. You also can't stretch yourself so much to the point that you're burnt out. You have to embrace saying no sometimes. Now, I personally think it's beautiful that you try to do for others, but you have to know your limits. And truthfully, I think we all know our limits. But for some reason, we go ahead and we try to push past them. Part of the reason why you try to push past them is because you struggle with saying no. The other reason is because you're trying to achieve excellence in the eyes of other people. What other people think about you should not overpower what you think of yourself, because you know that you're doing the best you can. The third way that you can embrace good being enough is to embrace the journey. Now, a lot of times we feel like the journey is punishment, right? We start to feel like, why can't we just go from point A to point B? Why we gotta jump through all these hoops, take all these detours, and get wounded on top of all of that? But you can't just skip the journey to get to where you want to be in life. Instead, you have to embrace the journey. Now, I have a little secret for you. The journey can be a beautiful thing, but it starts with you being able to identify where you are as good. Now, once you start to do that, you start to see all the good that's happening around you and in you. Now, no matter what journey you're on right now, I want you to know that there are parts of the journey that are good. You just have to choose to see them. Where you are right now is not where you'll always be. And that's why you have to embrace where you are right now in order for you to make it to where you want to be. The other day I was on TikTok and I came across a video of an interview that Tyler James Williams did. He was the main character in the show Everybody Hates Chris. In the interview, somebody asked him what advice did he have for someone that was trying to pursue their dreams. And he said to them, as he paused, because he did pause for a good amount of time, and he said, embrace the journey. And he talked about how once you go ahead and you achieve your goals, it's great. but you can never go back to the journey. You can never go back to enjoying the journey. So I just want you to think about this. The journey only happens one time. Once you achieve your goals, you are good. You're ecstatic, right? But we also have to become ecstatic about the journey because there is good in the journey. We have to let go of our expectations in order to see and embrace everything that is good. Our expectation on how things should be stops us from fully embracing all the good that is happening in us and around us. I really don't want you to miss out on all the good that God is doing in your life, all because you're focused on greatness. There's so much good going on around you. There's so much good that is in you. And there's so much good that is happening to you. You just have to choose to see it. Now, guess what, y'all? That's right. It's Q&S time. Q&S stands for quote and scripture. This is time I set aside in the episode to share quote and scripture with you to encourage you throughout the week ahead. The quote I chose for this week is by an anonymous person, and they said, "You will truly never be good enough for anyone else if you are not good enough for yourself first." You have to define good for yourself. You can't allow other people to come along and define good for you, because all they're going to do is base their definition of good off of society and where they think you should be and who they think you should be, or sometimes they even base it off of who they couldn't be. When you allow someone else to define good for you, this only creates pressure, and you don't need that. You have to see good in yourself. You can't wait for someone else to come along and see the good in you. No, you have to see it for yourself. And if you don't see any good in yourself, that's probably where you need to start. Now, don't get me wrong. Compliments are great, right? They're nice to hear from time to time. But what I'm saying is you should not allow compliments to be the first time you hear what's good about you. You should already know what you bring to the table. You should already know what is good about you. You have to love who you are, flaws and all. You can't wait until you achieve greatness to decide to start loving yourself. There are parts of you that are good, that are worth loving now. Don't miss that. The scripture I chose for this week is from Psalms chapter 23, verse 6, and I'm reading from the New King James Version, and it reads, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Now, my favorite part of that verse is that it says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." It could have said greatness, but it didn't. Now, Psalms 23 is a prayer, and we are all told in prayer that we are supposed to ask God for what we want. And in this prayer, they could have asked for greatness and mercy to follow them all the days of their life, but they didn't. And to be honest, they could have just asked for mercy to follow them all the days of their life, but they didn't. Do you want to know why they didn't? Because they saw power and goodness. Goodness was enough for them. Over time, we have diminished the power of good because everybody is aiming for great. But we honestly have to get back to good, being enough. We have to get back to embracing what God says about us and not what the world says about us. And we also have to get back to embracing the standards that God set for us and not what the world sets for us. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with this. You may not have achieved everything you wanted to yet, but where you are right now is good, and you should be proud about that. Now, I don't know you personally, but I am sure that you are not where you used to be, and that alone is why you should deem where you are right now as good. So stop putting all your focus and energy towards achieving greatness. Instead, enjoy where you are right now because you are doing good. Stop being hard on yourself and give yourself grace because you are doing better than you think you are. And start to embrace the journey because where you are right now is where God wants you to be. Where you are right now is not your permanent place. So while you are there, find the good in it. We have to stop waiting until we achieve greatness to enjoy life and start loving ourselves. Because at the end of the day, good is enough.
I know what you're telling me the truth. I'd rather have all your weight removed. You wonder why I don't let you in. Because I got better things to do. Better things. Better things. Moving on to bigger and better things. Been through the worst, I need better things. If you knew better,